A mysterious encounter. Milo had always been a curious soul, a boy who found the vast stretches of Zany 3 more fascinating than frightening. The planet's barren landscape, with its jagged rocks and windswept valleys, was a canvas that invited exploration. Though the world around him seemed empty and desolate, he saw it differently, a place where secrets lay buried, waiting to be uncovered. Today, at 13 years old, he was venturing farther than ever before. The sky above was thick with a reddish haze, the twin suns casting long, eerie shadows over the land. Milo's boots crunched on the dry, cracked earth as he moved deeper into the uncharted gorge, a place even the most seasoned explorers had avoided. His satchel, worn from years of use, clinked with the few belongings he carried: 2 pieces of stale bread and a strip of dried meat, remnants of his lunch. The other hand gripped a weathered data tablet, its flickering screen showing his father's trade routes. His father had been a cartographer and an adventurer, and it was through his maps that Milo had inherited the thirst for discovery. But today was different. Today, the land whispered of something beyond mere exploration. The gorge was silent, save for the faint rustling of the wind. Milo's breath quickened with anticipation as he moved deeper into the shadows. There was something about this place that felt alive. The air was thick with an unsettling scent, a sulphurous stench that tugged at his senses. He hesitated for a moment, his instincts warning him to turn back, but the allure of the unknown was stronger. As he rounded a bend in the gorge, his eyes locked onto something that stopped him in his tracks. His pulse raced, and his mouth went dry. In the center of the rocky terrain, sprawled across the earth, lay a colossal figure. Its body was covered in obsidian scales, dull and chipped with age. Its once majestic wings were crumpled, lying useless on the ground, their sharp edges worn down by time. The creature's breath came in shallow, labored gasps, and its molten gold eyes flickered weakly, barely alive. Milo's mind raced. This couldn't be real. Dragons were creatures of myth, legends passed down through generations. Sarno, the deadliest of them all, was a name that sent chills down the spines of even the bravest warriors. But this creature wasn't the terrifying force of destruction he had read about in stories. This dragon was dying. Fear and curiosity battled within Milo. The stories spoke of dragons that could wipe out entire cities with a single swipe of their tail, beasts whose power and ferocity were unmatched. Yet, the dragon before him was nothing like the terrifying figure he had imagined. It looked weak, emaciated, and vulnerable. He stood frozen, unable to tear his eyes away from the creature. For a moment, it seemed as though the world around him had disappeared, leaving only him and the dragon in a strange, silent standoff. Milo's instincts screamed at him to turn around, to run back to the safety of his village, to forget he had ever come this far. But something held him there, rooted to the spot. With trembling hands, he reached into his satchel, pulling out a small piece of bread. It was coarse and dry, nothing like the fresh food he would have preferred, but it was all he had. He hesitated for a moment, studying the dragon's molten eyes, which seemed to search his face, as if trying to understand his presence. Then, with a shaky voice, he spoke. "I don't know what you are, or why you're here. But you look hungry." Milo's heart hammered in his chest as he took a step closer. The dragon's gaze shifted, its head lifting slightly, a low growl rumbling from its throat. It wasn't a growl of anger, but of pain, a sound that vibrated through the air. Milo swallowed hard, his hands shaking as he held the bread out toward the beast. His mind screamed at him to run, but his feet refused to move. "I don't have much," he said, his voice quivering but still steady. "But you can have this." The dragon's eyes locked onto the bread in Milo's hands, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, with surprising delicacy for such a massive creature, the dragon shifted its head closer. Its nostrils flared, and Milo held his breath as the dragon sniffed the bread, its molten gaze never leaving him. For a moment, it seemed to hesitate, as though questioning Milo's intentions. And then, with slow, deliberate movements, the dragon opened its enormous jaws and took the bread. Milo flinched, half expecting the dragon to snap its teeth shut. But instead, the creature's movements were careful, almost reverent. It chewed slowly, swallowing with visible effort. A strange sensation stirred within Milo's chest. The dragon, this ancient, powerful creature, was weak, starving, and had accepted his offering. It was a moment of connection, an act of kindness that bridged the impossible divide between them. For the first time in his life, Milo felt the weight of history and legend collapsing around him. The dragon's molten eyes met his again, and this time, there was something else in them, something like gratitude, a sense of acknowledgement. The beast let out a low, rumbling sound, almost like a sigh, before resting its massive head back on the ground, its eyelids drooping in exhaustion. Milo's heart raced as he stood there, his mind reeling from the sheer impossibility of what had just happened. He had fed bread to a dragon, the most fearsome predator in the galaxy, and it had accepted his gift without so much as a growl. A part of him urged him to leave, to return to the safety of his village, to forget this encounter. But another part, the part that had driven him to explore the farthest reaches of this desolate world, felt a strange pull. There was something more here, something that could not be ignored. "I'll come back," Milo whispered to himself before speaking louder to the dragon. "I'll bring more food. You need it." As he slowly backed away, the dragon's gaze followed him, the fire in its eyes dimming but not extinguishing. Milo's heart was heavy, full of questions that only time could answer. What had happened to this creature? And why had it shown him such unexpected vulnerability? One thing was certain: this encounter was only the beginning. The promise of more. The day Milo had never expected to happen was now etched in his memory, a surreal moment he couldn't quite shake from his mind. The image of the dragon's molten eyes staring into his soul lingered, as if the creature had left a piece of itself within him. Milo couldn't return to the village. Not yet. His thoughts raced, and his legs carried him forward, but his mind stayed with the dragon. He had made a promise, a small, simple promise to bring more food. But somehow, it felt as if the promise carried more weight than just a handful of bread. As Milo wandered back through the gorge, the rocky terrain beneath his feet seemed to have transformed. What once seemed like a barren wasteland now held an almost mystical aura. The wind, which had howled angrily before, now seemed to whisper through the canyon, as though it too carried secrets and stories to be told. It was as if the land itself was aware of what had transpired here, aware of the unexpected connection between a young boy and an ancient, dying dragon. His mind kept returning to one question: why was the dragon here? How had such a powerful creature, the terror of legends, become so weak? In every tale he had heard, dragons were invincible, unstoppable forces of nature, feared and revered. But this dragon was something else entirely. Was it simply a casualty of time? Had the world changed in a way that even the most fearsome predators couldn't survive? Milo stopped in his tracks, suddenly overcome with a sense of urgency. The creature's fragile state haunted him. Was there a chance to help it? Was there more to this story than mere survival? His eyes flicked to the data tablet in his hand, the map of his father's trade routes still displayed on its cracked screen. The tablet had always guided him to the hidden places of the world, the forgotten ruins and hidden caves. But now it felt like a tool for something much more significant. "I need to know more," Milo muttered to himself, determination growing within him. He needed to find answers. The journey back to the village was long, but Milo didn't feel the fatigue that normally accompanied it. His thoughts were too busy spinning with possibilities. As he approached the edge of the gorge, he caught sight of the sun dipping beneath the horizon, casting a brilliant golden light across the valley. The last rays of the day shimmered on the barren landscape, painting everything in hues of red and amber. Yet, instead of the usual calm, a restless energy filled him. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath. The village lay ahead, nestled in the valley, a small cluster of stone homes and metal structures that had been built to withstand the harsh environment of Zany 3. The people here were tough, accustomed to the rough terrain and the challenges that came with living on a planet that seemed determined to strip away everything. Yet, despite the harsh conditions, the villagers lived in a kind of harmony with the land. They had learned to adapt, and now they worked the fields and traded with nearby colonies, thriving in an isolated, self-sustaining existence. Milo's parents, like many others, had lived on the planet for generations. His father, once a cartographer and explorer, had mapped the trade routes that connected Zany 3 to the distant worlds beyond. His mother was a biologist, studying the strange flora and fauna of the planet, always searching for new ways to help the people adapt to their harsh surroundings. They had raised him to be resourceful, creative, and to never shy away from the unknown. But Milo had always felt like he was destined for more than the village life. The wild unknown had called to him since he was young, and today it had answered in a way he never could have imagined. As he entered the village, he passed familiar faces, neighbors going about their daily routines, but none of them could have understood what he had experienced, what he had seen in the gorge. Not yet, at least. No one would believe him. The stories they told of dragons were just that, stories, passed down through generations like folklore. A small part of Milo considered sharing his encounter, but the rest of him knew that he would sound insane. No one would take him seriously. He headed straight for his home, his thoughts still centered on the promise he had made to the dragon. Inside, his mother was tending to the small garden they kept, a patch of crops that had somehow managed to survive in the unforgiving environment. Milo's father was at the workbench, meticulously going over his maps. He looked up as Milo entered, his brow furrowing with curiosity. "Back already?" his father asked. "How was your trip?" Milo hesitated for a moment, unsure how to explain. He didn't want to lie, but he didn't have the words to convey what he had just experienced. Instead, he shifted the conversation. "I need to go back out," he said finally, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "There's something. I found something. I need to understand it." His father paused, studying him with a mix of concern and understanding. "You've always been the curious one," he said softly, the faintest smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "But remember, son, curiosity can be dangerous. Some things are better left alone." But Milo wasn't listening. His mind was already back in the gorge, his thoughts fixated on the dragon, the promise he had made, and the feeling that there was more at stake here than he could understand. He needed to go back, to learn more, to find the answers that tugged at his very soul. "I'll be careful," Milo said, determination hardening his voice. "I have to go back. The dragon. There's something about it. It's not what the stories say." His father's expression softened, a glimmer of recognition flashing in his eyes. He knew that look, the same one he had worn when he was younger, setting out on his own adventures. He gave a slight nod. "Then take some supplies. And be safe, Milo. The world out there doesn't play by the rules we know." Milo nodded, a quiet sense of gratitude swelling in his chest. He grabbed a few extra provisions, packed his satchel, and headed back out, his resolve stronger than ever. This journey was no longer about discovery. It was about something much deeper. It was about understanding the true power of human kindness and the mysteries of a world that had more to offer than anyone could imagine. The unseen path. The sun had barely risen when Milo set out again, his steps firm and resolute as he made his way back to the gorge. The early morning light bathed the valley in soft hues of pink and gold, but the beauty of the landscape was lost on him. His mind was already deep in thought, focused entirely on the dragon, his promise, and the mysteries that still loomed over him like a heavy fog. This time, however, Milo wasn't just retracing his steps. He was seeking something more, a deeper understanding of the creature he had fed, a glimpse into a world beyond the one he had known. With each step, The gravity of his promise weighed heavier on his chest. What had he gotten himself into? Was he ready for what lay ahead? As he descended into the gorge once more, the world around him seemed quieter than before. The harsh winds that had greeted him on his first journey had subsided, leaving a strange, unnatural stillness in the air. It felt as though the land was holding its breath, waiting for him to uncover the secrets hidden in its vast, empty spaces. Milo's heart beat faster with each step, his eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of the dragon. He had only left hours ago, but already he felt a sense of urgency, the need to return, to keep his word, and to understand the dragon's plight. Why had it been so weak? What had drained the life from such a powerful being? He reached the spot where he had first found the dragon. But to his surprise, the creature was not where he had left it. The ground was empty, the rocky surface undisturbed, and the air felt colder. Panic rose in Milo's chest. Had the dragon moved, or was it gone? He spun around, his eyes scanning the surrounding cliffs, but there was no sign of the massive beast. Then, a faint sound reached his ears. It was a low, rumbling growl, so soft that it almost sounded like the wind itself. Milo froze, his pulse quickening. He wasn't alone. Carefully, he moved forward, following the sound until he reached the far side of the gorge. There, nestled between two jagged rocks, lay the dragon, its massive form partially obscured by shadows. Its wings were folded tightly against its body, and its eyes, though still dim, glowed faintly in the low light. It was clear the creature hadn't moved far, but it seemed different, weaker, somehow. Milo approached cautiously, his breath shallow. He felt a deep sense of responsibility, an unspoken connection between him and the dragon that couldn't be explained. He knew he had to do something, but what? What could he do for a creature so ancient, so powerful, yet so broken? "I brought more," Milo said softly, reaching into his satchel. He pulled out the small bundle of food he had packed: dried meat, more bread, and a few other provisions he thought might help. The dragon's eyes flicked toward him, a spark of recognition shining through the weariness. Slowly, its head lifted slightly, its nostrils flaring as it sniffed the air. For a long moment, there was no movement. Then, the dragon's jaws parted, its mouth opening just enough to reveal sharp, jagged teeth. Milo flinched, but the dragon didn't attack. Instead, it gave a low, rasping sigh, as if too tired to move further. Milo knelt down, carefully extending the bread toward the creature. "Here," he said, his voice shaking but steady. "I don't have much, but I'll bring more next time. You don't have to be alone." The dragon's molten eyes met his once more, and this time, there was no desperation or hunger in its gaze. Instead, there was something new, a flicker of gratitude. The dragon's massive head lowered slightly, and with surprising gentleness, it took the bread from Milo's outstretched hand. Milo sat back, watching in awe as the dragon chewed slowly, savoring the small offering. The creature's movements were careful, deliberate, as if each bite required immense effort. It was clear that every bit of energy the dragon had left was going into this simple act of eating. Milo watched for a while, lost in thought. As the dragon finished the bread, its eyes flicked back to him, and for a moment, they simply regarded each other in silence. There were no words, no promises, just the unspoken understanding between two beings from very different worlds. But as Milo sat there, an idea began to form in his mind. The dragon was clearly struggling, but it was alive, still breathing, still fighting. And if there was one thing he knew, it was that life was meant to be fought for. Could there be a way to help? Could there be more to the dragon's story than simple survival? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of something distant, a faint rumble that grew louder with each passing second. At first, Milo thought it was just the wind, but then the ground beneath him vibrated, and he felt a tremor in the air. Something was coming. The dragon lifted its head, its eyes narrowing. It turned its head toward the source of the sound, then back to Milo, a strange urgency in its gaze. Milo stood up, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew what he had to do. "Stay here," Milo whispered, though he knew the dragon likely couldn't understand. "I'll be right back." With that, he turned and sprinted toward the edge of the gorge, his pulse racing. He had no idea what was coming, but he knew one thing for sure. The dragon wasn't alone, and the world around him was about to reveal even more of its secrets. The whispering winds. Milo's heart raced as he sprinted toward the edge of the gorge. The distant rumble grew louder, vibrating the ground beneath his boots. What was this new danger that seemed to be emerging from the very heart of the barren valley? His mind spun with questions as he pushed forward, not knowing whether he was running toward a threat or away from one. He reached the crest of the gorge and stopped to catch his breath, his chest heaving with each gasp of air. The landscape before him seemed still, untouched by the chaos that churned in his chest. But the sound, low, ominous, and continuous, was undeniable. It wasn't just the wind, not just the natural rumblings of the land. There was something else in the air, something alive. The wind had shifted again, this time carrying with it a strange, almost unnatural chill. It brushed against Milo's skin, prickling his senses, and carried with it a faint whisper. The sound was so faint that it could have easily been dismissed as the wind itself, but Milo's sharp instincts told him otherwise. There was a voice, or rather, a presence hidden within the gusts, a presence that seemed to speak to him in an ancient language, its meaning just beyond his grasp. His eyes darted around, trying to locate the source. The wind swirled in every direction, moving with a mind of its own, as if guided by some unseen force. And then, just as quickly as the tremors had begun, the ground stilled. The sound faded. The world fell back into an eerie calm. But Milo could sense it. Something was there, watching him. He turned to look back at the dragon, who had remained where he left it, its eyes still locked on him from the shadows. The creature's form was impossibly still, its breath shallow, but its gaze followed Milo's every movement. It seemed to be waiting, as though it knew something he didn't. Milo swallowed hard. Whatever was coming, whatever this presence in the wind was, the dragon seemed to understand it far better than he did. The question now wasn't if danger was approaching, but what it was. "Are you sensing something too?" Milo asked aloud, though he didn't really expect an answer. He knew, deep down, that the dragon wasn't just any ordinary creature. It was ancient, a being that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. It had knowledge, wisdom, and instincts far beyond his own, but could it also sense the coming storm? The dragon shifted slightly, its massive head turning toward the distant horizon, its nostrils flaring once more. Its molten eyes seemed to glimmer with an unsettling sense of recognition, though Milo couldn't tell whether it was a warning or a sign of something even more ominous. Suddenly, the ground began to tremble again. This time, it wasn't distant. It was here. The source of the rumbling was closing in, and Milo could feel it, a pulse beneath his feet, as if the earth itself was alive, shaking in anticipation. Without warning, the silence broke. From behind the ridge, something massive appeared, an enormous shadow that blotted out the light, casting the valley in a darkness as deep as night. Milo's breath caught in his throat as the figure emerged into view, its enormous form towering above the landscape. It was a ship. No, not a ship, but something much larger, something that seemed almost alive, as if it were a creature in its own right, made of twisted metal and alien energy. The ship hovered just above the ground, its underbelly glowing with a sickly green hue that pulsed in time with the tremors beneath Milo's feet. The air grew thick with static, and the temperature dropped rapidly. He could feel the weight of its presence, as if it were sucking the very life out of the air around him. The dragon's eyes locked onto the ship, and a low, rumbling growl emanated from its chest. Milo's heart thudded in his chest as the dragon's body tensed. The creature's wings fluttered weakly, and though it was weak, it seemed to be gathering the last of its strength, preparing for something. "What is this?" Milo thought, unable to tear his eyes away from the ship. He had never seen anything like it. Its surface was like nothing he had encountered in his studies of alien technology. It wasn't just mechanical, it was organic, as if it had been grown rather than built. Suddenly, a beam of light shot from the belly of the ship, illuminating the landscape in a bright, blinding flash. Milo shielded his eyes, but the light was so intense that he could feel it burning his skin. The beam struck the ground near the dragon, and there was a loud crack, followed by an explosion of energy that sent a shockwave through the gorge. Milo stumbled back, his legs buckling beneath him, as the ground around him began to fracture. The dragon let out a deafening roar, its wings flaring wide in an attempt to defend itself, but the ship's beam continued to pulse, pushing the creature back with an overwhelming force. Milo's mind raced. Why was the ship attacking? Was it trying to kill the dragon? Or was there something else going on here? He wasn't sure, but one thing was certain. The situation was spiraling out of control. Whatever this ship was, it was not here to make peace. The dragon was no longer a mere victim of starvation. It was a force of nature, a creature that had been brought low by something much bigger than it could understand. And now Milo was caught in the middle of it. The silent encounter. Milo's breath hitched in his throat as the massive alien ship hovered ominously above the ground, its greenish glow casting an eerie light across the jagged terrain. The air crackled with an unsettling energy, and the tremors in the earth continued, growing stronger as the ship's beam pulsed with a relentless rhythm. Milo could feel the shockwave reverberating through his very bones. He had no idea what kind of force this ship commanded, but it was clear it was something beyond his comprehension. The dragon, battered and weakened from its years of starvation, let out another guttural roar, its wings fluttering desperately in an attempt to ward off the alien energy. But the ship's beam was unyielding, pushing the creature back further with every passing second. Milo's heart pounded in his chest, caught between two forces that seemed equally unstoppable, one born of the planet's ancient past, the other from the depths of a dark, alien future. "Stop!" Milo shouted, though his voice was barely audible over the roar of the ship and the dragon's protests. The words seemed meaningless, swallowed by the air that was thick with fear and the unknown. What could he possibly do to stop this? He was just a boy, one with a heart full of curiosity and a satchel of bread. His mind raced, searching for an answer, for something that could halt this inevitable clash between two powerful forces. But the answer didn't come. Instead, his gaze locked onto the dragon once more. The creature's molten eyes met his, and for a fleeting moment, there was an understanding between them. The dragon, weakened though it was, had seen something in Milo, a flicker of compassion that transcended the creature's primal instincts. It was clear now that the dragon wasn't just trying to survive. It was seeking something far more important than just food or safety. Milo stepped forward, his legs trembling beneath him, torn between his fear and the desire to help. "I won't let them do this," he whispered to the dragon, unsure if it could even understand him. But as his feet moved closer, he felt a strange pull, a magnetic force drawing him toward the creature. The dragon's head tilted slightly, as if acknowledging his presence, and its gaze softened, just a fraction. There was a moment of peace between them, a fleeting understanding that spoke of something ancient and far beyond words. The alien ship's beam intensified, pushing the dragon back even further, but the creature seemed to gather its remaining strength. Milo could see the muscles in its body tense, its wings trembling with the effort to lift itself into the air. The dragon wasn't just fighting for survival now. It was fighting for something deeper, something that even the ship's advanced technology couldn't easily overcome. Milo's mind raced. What did the dragon want? What was this creature so desperate to protect? It wasn't just about food. It wasn't just about the desperate act of kindness Milo had shown by giving it bread. The creature had seen something in him, and perhaps it was the same thing the ship sought. Suddenly, the beam from the ship ceased. The air hung heavy with an unnatural silence, and Milo felt a shift in the atmosphere. The dragon stopped struggling, its massive form faltering slightly, but not entirely defeated. Instead, it looked up at the sky, its molten eyes scanning the horizon, as if it had sensed something that was yet to come. The ship, too, seemed to pause, its eerie glow flickering slightly, as if the alien force had momentarily lost its resolve. Milo didn't understand it, but he could feel that something profound was happening. The dragon wasn't merely reacting to the ship, it was part of something bigger. The alien presence was part of a much larger picture, a puzzle that Milo couldn't yet comprehend. "Why aren't you fighting?" Milo asked aloud, though he knew the dragon couldn't answer him directly. But somehow he felt that the creature's silence was speaking volumes. The dragon's wariness of the ship seemed to come from a deeper place, a place filled with ancient knowledge that had been buried in the earth for eons. The ship hovered lower now, the metallic hum echoing in the valley. Milo could feel its power in the air, its pulse thumping in time with his heartbeat. The ground beneath him shuddered again, but this time it wasn't just the tremors of the ship's power. It was something else, something familiar, yet foreign, something that connected the ship and the dragon, and perhaps even Milo, in ways that were far beyond understanding. And then, as if guided by an invisible force, a light shot down from the belly of the ship, illuminating the dragon's body. It wasn't a weapon this time. No, it was something else, something delicate. The light enveloped the creature, and for a moment, Milo saw what looked like tendrils of energy flowing from the ship to the dragon, not in violence, but in a quiet exchange. The dragon's wings fluttered, and it let out a soft huff, a sound of recognition, not of aggression. Milo stepped closer, his breath catching in his throat. The alien presence that had threatened to tear everything apart now seemed to be reaching out to the dragon, and the dragon, despite its weakness, was responding. Was this some form of communication? A negotiation? Milo's mind raced as he pieced together the strange connection between these two ancient powers, the dragon, once the galaxy's deadliest predator, and the alien ship, a mysterious force from beyond the stars. The ship wasn't here to conquer the dragon. No, it was here to make contact, to make an exchange. Milo's heart thumped in his chest as he looked up at the sky, wondering what role he played in this moment. He was just a boy, but in that instant, he understood that he was standing on the edge of something monumental, something that would change the course of history. The wind howled, carrying with it a faint whisper, and as the light from the alien ship bathed the dragon in its soft glow, Milo took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. The unspoken pact. The silence in the air grew thick, almost suffocating, as the beam from the alien ship continued to pulse gently over the dragon's broken form. Milo stood still, caught in the stillness, his mind struggling to make sense of what was unfolding before him. The landscape around him, once harsh and unforgiving, now seemed strangely calm. Even the wind had stilled, leaving only the faint hum of the ship and the labored breaths of the dragon filling the void. Milo watched, mesmerized, as the dragon's wings twitched slightly, the iridescent scales glistening under the ship's light. The once fearsome creature that had been the subject of countless tales and myths was now just a shadow of its former self, a malnourished, broken thing. Yet, as the light from the ship continued to bathe it, there was a subtle shift. The dragon's labored breathing slowed, the tension in its massive frame easing just a fraction. For the first time in what must have been years, it seemed at peace, as if something deep within its soul had been touched. The alien ship's energy resonated with a strange warmth, and Milo, despite his fear, felt something deep within himself stir. A connection was being formed, one that transcended the divide between human and alien, between ancient creatures and advanced technology. It was a bond of survival, of need, of something more primal than anything Milo had ever imagined. The ship hovered silently, the beam retracting, leaving only the soft glow around the dragon. Milo took a cautious step forward. drawn in by the quiet strength of the moment. His eyes met the dragon's molten gaze once more, and he felt a flicker of something. A recognition, a knowing that was both ancient and brand new. The dragon, though weak, was no longer a creature of fear. It was an ally, a being caught in a struggle that Milo could scarcely understand, yet he knew his role was somehow tied to it. He didn't speak. There was no need for words. Instead, he simply stood there, offering his presence, offering a willingness to understand. Milo had no idea what this connection meant or what the future held, but in this moment there was no fear. There was only the shared understanding that something extraordinary was happening, something that would change everything. The quiet moment stretched almost unbearably long before the dragon's wings fluttered once more. It was subtle, a soft shift of muscle, but it was enough to make Milo's heart race. The creature's massive form began to lift slightly, its wings stretching out as though testing their strength. The scars from years of suffering were still visible, but there was something different now, an energy, a power that had been reawakened. Milo watched as the dragon slowly lifted its head, the molten eyes fixed firmly on the alien ship above. It was a moment of clarity. The dragon understood something that Milo did not. There was an exchange happening, a silent agreement between the two forces. The ship had not come to destroy the dragon. No, it had come for something else. It had come to make a pact. The air around them seemed to shimmer with energy as the alien ship emitted a low, vibrating hum. Milo felt the ground tremble slightly beneath him, the subtle reverberation sending a jolt through his spine. The ship was communicating with the dragon, but the language was not one of words. It was something older, more elemental, a kind of energy that only the oldest beings in the galaxy could comprehend. Milo's mind struggled to grasp what was happening. What could these two forces want with each other? Why had the dragon, a creature of such power and destruction, allowed itself to be at the mercy of the alien ship? And what was the ship's interest in this seemingly broken creature? The dragon's gaze finally shifted back to Milo, and for a brief moment, it almost seemed to speak to him, not in words, but in the depth of its eyes. There was a recognition in those molten orbs, a sense that Milo was part of something far greater than he had ever imagined. He wasn't just a boy lost in a barren world. He was a part of this. This strange, cosmic dance was somehow his to witness, his to understand. As if acknowledging this, the dragon's wings beat once, twice, lifting it higher into the air. It wasn't a full flight, but enough to suggest that its strength had begun to return. The energy from the ship seemed to envelop it, filling the cracks in its body with a new vitality. It was as though the ship's presence was fueling the dragon's restoration. The powerful creature was no longer alone. It had an ally in this strange, alien force. Milo stood in awe, watching the transformation unfold before him. The dragon, once a symbol of destruction and fear, now hovered above the ground, its form stronger, more powerful than it had been before. And the ship, despite its intimidating presence, seemed to be offering its help, its energy, in a way that made the two entities seem not so different after all. Both had been broken. Both had been searching for something they could not find alone. The dragon let out a low, rumbling growl, but this time there was no malice in it. Instead, it was a sound of recognition, of gratitude. It was the sound of a promise being made. The dragon, though still a creature of immense power, had become something more, something bound to the alien force above, and to Milo, the unlikely witness to this alliance. The ship began to rise, slowly, its hum deepening as it ascended into the sky. The dragon, with its wings spread wide, followed the ship's movement, its gaze unwavering. It was as if they were bound together now, in a way that neither could escape. The bond between them was more than a simple connection. It was an unspoken pact. And as the ship disappeared into the sky, taking the dragon with it, Milo felt the weight of the moment settle upon him. The world around him seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to happen next. But for now, all he could do was stand in the vast, empty valley, staring up at the sky where the ship had vanished, and wondered just how far this strange journey would take him.